Welcome, everyone, to the episode 0 of the Zeitgeist Lab Collections podcast. My name is Alex. I'm one of the co-hosts, and I'm joined by my other co-host, Brian. Brian, how's it going?
I'm doing good. We had an interesting chat before we got on the mics, but I'm doing good. But I'm still processing
For sure.
some information.
And I think a lot of that will start to come to light over the course of the next, 10 to 15 episodes.
Yeah, this is just episode 0, so we got to save that for later.
Absolutely. So I think we're going to start by kind of explaining the basis of the pod, the idea behind it, and maybe what we're hoping to accomplish. So it started as wanting to do a podcast about Drive Thru Records, kind of in the vein of going through album by album, and reached out to Brian, and I was fortunate enough to have him say he was interested in something like that. But through talking, we kind of came to this idea that, a podcast about one thing, specifically like Drive Thru Records, that only has so many releases, it has a shelf life, and we want something that can be, we can endure with, I suppose. So we came up with this idea of just collections of episodes about a culturally important topic. And I mean, you can loosely define culturally important to one of us or to both of us. And so the plan is we're going to do, roughly 10 episodes about Drive Thru Records, as that was the original topic, and learn
Then
about.
We're going to make a hard pivot to the Iraq War.
Yes, the Iraq War.
Very serious.
I think that's good. It's going to become a podcast. I think we're going to try to get George W. Bush on for the second season.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely
we're going to do our top
to
10 favorite military coups, our favorite U.S. interventions.
Yes.
The U.S. military.
Exactly. So I know everyone's here for the music, but it's definitely going to become political and controversial very quick as the seasons progress. But so that's the idea. We'll do a collection of episodes, then move on to something else. I mean, is there anything you wanted to add about how we came to the pod, or what your thoughts are on the concept?
Yeah, because when I hear the word zeitgeist, I think right now, but this is something that we're looking at the past and the present and maybe even the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm a little high too, so
very nice.
Yeah.
So I think your zeitgeist would definitely, to me, also kind of indicate the present. But I think so, kind of reframing it in what our first collection is about, which is like the music and releases of Drive Thru Records. That's certainly something that's passé. I mean, the glory days of all of those artists, was between 15 and 20 years ago. But I think what I hope to do is explore some of the essential releases and the most influential artists that came out of this period from this particular label. And I think hope to discover how that influence is still kind of seen throughout the creative process and music industry today. So I think the zeitgeist can be affected a lot by the past, and then, how is it going to impact the future? So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah. And I think a lot of Drive Thru, or at least the aesthetic is kind of apparent now in a way, mm-hmm. or is on the verge of coming back.
I'd say, I mean, the early aesthetic was very DIY, because I mean, honestly, they didn't have a lot of money. They got bands that they believed in, I think, and those bands kind of had to help pull the label up, because it just kind of started from nothing. So, and I think that DIY aesthetic is very much in again right now, in a lot of music and entertainment.
Right. Yeah, that's a whole other conversation about how DIY is now it's more about, I mean, I was telling my mom about how I was starting this podcast, and I was
mm-hmm.
Yeah, people don't start bands anymore, they start podcasts.
Right.
And it's equally the same amount of fear of commitment and eagerness to start a podcast with the right people. Because I've secretly wanted to do a podcast with friends for the longest time, so I'm really stoked to do this. But
same here.
Yeah, but it is super DIY. What we're doing is super DIY too.
For sure. All right, so I think now's a good time to kind of maybe introduce ourselves. So like I said earlier, I'm Alex. My co-host here is Brian. although some of our listeners may know Brian better as his online persona, the Fentuzler. So maybe if you want to go ahead and kind of introduce yourself, give us a little bit of background and whatever you think is relevant.
Yeah, I feel like most of the people that are listening to this know me as the Fentuzler, and then like maybe a fourth of the people listening to this who are probably going to be like the other half of my friend, like online friends who don't know about the Fentuzler or found out about the Fentuzler and brought it up to like the rest of my friends in our group chat, and I got really mad. Yeah, just depending on where I decide to promote this, which, you know, like whether I do this on Facebook and Instagram and people listen to this more. Yeah, so maybe it might be half that know me as me and the other half know as Fentuzler. So yeah, how do you explain the Fentuzler? Like that's just
there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, that could probably be a collection or a season all on its own, possibly. So
yeah, that's a hard one to explain. Like I received a package in the mail from someone in I guess our friend group, and they wrote T Fentuzler on it. So I had to explain that to a roommate.
Nice. So
like hey,
the people you live with had no idea that you had this online persona? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
I ended up telling my most recent roommate about the Fentuzler, and then we ended up starting a D&D group together where I called my character Fentuzler, so I got to explain that. So there are dual Fentuzlers in the world at one point.
Well, very cool.
Doing equally nerdy things. But yeah, the Fentuzler is an unstoppable beast of a thing that I've committed to for, I guess, 2 years now. Like as of like a couple weeks ago.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
But I'd say that, I mean, this is like literally last night's the first time you and I have ever talked outside of Twitter. It seems that you are quite different from the Fentuzler character. Is that fair, or?
I guess so. Yeah, I always thought of it as like an exaggeration of me.
Mm-hmm.
But like that like was just for my own amusement, like
yeah.
But yeah, no, it's just like I choose to share like a lot of like really intense stuff through the Fentuzler, as we know. But like yeah, there's like a lot that like I just choose not to share through the Fentuzler. So yeah, it is kind of like we were talking about like earlier today, like we were talking about like my job, and like I was telling you about like how like yeah, I never told anyone in our Twitter universe like what I did as for a living, as like when the Fentuzler started, which was at my old job, because like that persona just didn't like, it doesn't go hand in hand with what I did for a living. So it was like yeah, so like yeah, I remember I was telling you earlier, I was like, yeah, I didn't want to tell anyone because I didn't want anyone to think I was like a good person because of my job. Like,
yeah.
Because yeah, but yeah, so yeah, there's some differences there. Like yeah, that's just one that's a nut we'll have to crack at a different time, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think so. For me, I mean, I'm excited to talk about our first topic and any topics beyond that. But for me, I'm actually really excited to get to know the person behind the Fentuzler, you, Brian, and see what you're really like. Because I think it's going to be a lot of fun to get to know each other, because we don't know each other really. We know each other's kind of personas.
That's what I was thinking too. It's like we kind of like, we've done a lot of trolling. We've been very insincere, like for like a lot on Twitter.
Absolutely.
And just like annoying the shit out of people, probably.
Most definitely.
And like, yeah. And yeah, now we're sitting down having a semi-serious conversation, and we're just kind of embark on this adventure together. And
For sure.
I'm super excited.
Yeah, I was just going to introduce myself for our listeners. I'm Alex. If you follow me on Twitter, you know I'm PolySciAlex, which is not quite as much of a character as maybe the Fentuzler, but it's definitely a heightened version of myself, and a very specific version of myself that I guess it's just all of my instincts to be as annoying as possible. And then I just kind of dump that onto Twitter, and it's it's who I am, but it's also a lot of who I'm not necessarily. I'm hoping that through this exploration of different topics and kind of putting my real self out there, that can be, I guess, the next layer peeled back on who I am. And yeah, I don't know that I have much more to add about myself, but that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Yeah, I feel like we'll figure it out as we go along.
For sure. Okay, so episode 0, we're just kind of here to do those formalities, which we just did, and now we're going to move on to talking about what the first collection is going to be about, which is, as I framed it on Twitter, the legendary Drive Thru Records. Legendary.
Are we calling it a collection, or are we calling it a season?
I don't know. What do you want to? I mean, I'm open to that. I know that we had, with the title, we had used the word collection, but we can.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's like, yeah, this would be collection 1.
Yeah.
Episode 0. Yeah. Yeah, I know. Like, I thought podcasts had seasons for some reason.
I think they can have either. I mean, yeah. I watched that Great British Bake Off show, and like on Netflix, each one's called The Collection.
Oh, is it? Yeah, I've never seen that. That's like a show I gotta watch if I'm in like a relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a relationship show.
Is it?
Like, just based on past experiences, like any like thing in that genre, for me, it's got to be like, yeah, it's like, it's like sort of, I don't want to say it's like a pre-sex show, but it's just like, it's like one of those shows you just watch like deep into a relationship when you're like bored of everything else.
Right.
That's just the vibe I get from it.
For
that
sure.
And, like, Gilmore Girls is like another one that I see a lot of chatter about on Twitter now, especially.
Yeah.
And I feel left out because it's like, that's like another just relationship show. I feel like that, like, at this point, I'm not even looking for like a life partner. I just want someone to finally just sit me down and just show me all of Gilmore Girls together.
I mean, I never watched it being single, so I can't say for sure, but I can say that I think it's an excellent show that I would recommend to anyone, regardless of their relationship status.
Yeah, it's just got one of those just relationship shows vibes.
Yeah. Okay,
which is a real genre of TV that I invented.
Is it? Okay.
Relationship TV. Yeah.
Nice. So we're here to talk about Drive Thru Records. As
not
I said,
relationship TV.
Not relationship TV. This is Drive Thru Records, which is not relationship music, I don't think. Maybe like it is. Maybe that's what we'll find out.
Yeah.
But like I said, I think in our tweet kind of a day or two ago, I consider the label legendary in the sense that it brought a lot of bands to the forefront and to the public eye that weren't there before, that I think have shaped, for a lot of people around my age, their musical tastes and musical sensibilities, and just had a tremendous roster of artists who I think accomplished so much, both on the label and after the end of the label, or after the end of their relationship with the label. So I'm curious, because the Drive Thru Records thing was my idea, and I kind of twisted your arm into it. What are your thoughts? Like, when you heard Drive Thru Records, or when that term, when we first started talking about it, what is your history with any of the bands on this label?
It started like a really long time ago. Like, it always, Drive Thru Records and like the bands and like the aesthetic, that all like signified to me like a sense of like unattainable coolness at the time. Like, I was in like middle school, like 6th, 7th grade, I think. My like friend's cool older sister had like a guitar amp with like all sort of like band stickers and shit. Like, with like, they were all like mostly like Drive Thru Records bands. Like, I think like the first time I saw like Alistair or like The Movie Life or some shit, it was on like a guitar case or something of like my friend's older sister, who's like 5-6 years older than us. I think the first time I saw, they're not a Drive Thru band, but the first time I saw like the classic like glass jawed GJ logo was like on like her amp or something, and I remember seeing that and being like, I knew all these were bands and shit, but I wasn't like cool enough to know about like, or to know where to find them, you know?
Yeah.
Like their music at least. So like, I remember, yeah. So I remember seeing like the Glassjaw sticker and being like, "That's so fucking sick." And then
Yeah.
years later, I'd find out, yeah, they are insanely sick, but also very misogynistic,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But not anymore. Just that one album. He just really didn't like that one girl.
Yeah.
But yeah, but yeah. So that was it for a while, and then I eventually just got into Newfound Glory like in like seventh grade, and like Sticks and Stones was like really huge.
Hmm.
The self-titled like was even bigger for me.
Yeah, me too. I,
Um,
I agree that self-titled for me, that's like the ultimate NFG album.
yeah, that was the first time I heard them. I heard like Hit or Miss, I think,
Uh-huh.
and then I became obsessed with Sticks and Stones, and like that's when I just got like a bigger awareness of like Drive Thru Records, and
Yeah.
like my friend got me into Something Corporate through like that one song, If You See Jordan.
Uh-huh.
I remember I had that like on a mix CD when I was like in seventh grade, and that was like the only song I knew by them for like the longest time.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, it was Drive Thru Records was there, but like I wasn't like obsessively like looking for every band at that point. I was just really in love with like Blink and Newfound Glory, basically.
Yeah.
At
So
that point.
so for me, it started. One of my first concerts I ever went to was Blink 182 on the Take Off Your Pants and Jacket tour. I was 14, and Midtown and Newfound Glory were opening for them, and I had never listened to either of those bands before. But I remember thinking the concert was sick, so I was like, okay, I want to explore these bands. And I think it was like the next day or like that following weekend, I went into a Hot Topic and I saw this compilation CD. It was called Welcome to the Family, and it was a drive-through comp with all like each band that was currently on their roster contributed one or two songs. And so I flipped it over. I see, oh, this has Midtown and Newfound Glory. I'm gonna check this out and see what the rest of this is about. And that introduced me to like Finch, Something Corporate, the Benjamins, the Movie Life. And like at that point, I was kind of hooked, and I started building somewhat of a collection, particularly like with Newfound Glory and Something Corporate were the ones I was really drawn to at first. And then I think it was probably 4 years later, they came out with the greatest hits, like Drive Thru Greatest Hits, and I picked that up. And that's when I remembered I would see like on the sides of some of the Drive Thru records, it would say like DTR number 12 or number 13. So like they labeled each one of their releases with a number, and like some sort of OCD or completist part of my brain was like, oh, I need to collect all these. And that's like exactly what I did over the course of like 2 or 3 years. And I amassed this huge collection. And just through doing that and discovering some of these bands that I otherwise wouldn't have listened to, it's an impressive body of work that the artists have been able to put together. And to me, that's what I felt most impressed upon, was just like what this music has accomplished and what it has meant, I guess, to me over the years.
So like, did this like form like your complete like taste in music at the time?
I say so. So like, I mean, I was a big like Elton John fan because that was what my dad was into. So I've been listening to that since that's the first music I can remember. So like Elton John, Billy Joel. And then I kind of grew up and I got into more like radio pop. So I was big into Backstreet Boys and
Same.
NSYNC and Britney Spears and all that. And then so that what I remember is, so the move kind of towards this thing was watching MTV and seeing the making of and then the premiere of the Blink video for All the Small Things, and they're doing the parodies of all the boy band and Britney Spears type videos.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, hey, I actually like this song. The music was good, and these guys have a sense of humor because it's things I recognize. So then I picked up Enema of the State and got into Blink. I was like, oh, this is cool. Like I still like these things that they're making fun of, like the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, but this is actually good music too. And it's also relatable because they're singing about things I care about, like, girls I like or parents who are pissing me off or whatever. And then I finally convinced my dad, please take me to a concert. They're coming to town. So he's the one that took me to this Blink show. And then I got into Drive Thru. And then that's from there where the shift kind of came. And I was like, okay, Newfound Glory and Something Corporate. And to this day, those are still my two favorite Drive Thru bands, and like Something Corporate. And then I've just followed Andrew McMahon through Jack's Mannequin and now his kind of solo project. So I think that in a very linear fashion, Backstreet Boys to Blink to this Welcome to the Family comp kind of made me the person I am from an artistic and aesthetic standpoint, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. How old are you, by the way?
I
So are
am
you like
33.
okay? So you're 2 years older than me then.
Okay.
Damn. Yeah, I just turned 31.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I've got I think 5 more months until I turn 34.
Damn.
So yeah, that's my background with Drive Thru. So I didn't prepare enough, but I just wanted to go over some basic facts, and I don't like being like the person that's reading from a wiki, but they're an independent record label that was started in Sherman Oaks, California, owned and operated by the Rains siblings, Richard and Stephanie. And I think kind of like we've touched on with some of the bands, they had a pop punk sound with a lot of the bands they went after. Though that certainly changed throughout the years. I think as we explore some of the releases, they got more into some heavier music, and then also more into like some more folky and singer-songwriter type vibes through some of their releases. So I think they were definitely a record label that could be wide-ranging in what they were trying to put out. And so their first release was back in 1997, and they were a fairly active label up through 2008, which is when their last release was. So they had about an 11-year run, and they put out 83 releases. So not a
Yeah, I remember them still being around when I was like in high school when like Hello Goodbye was first like popping off.
Yeah, and I think that was like one of their last really big releases. I mean,
Yeah.
they
And,
so
like, Halifax was like a thing for a while.
yeah, Halifax was a big one. So that's kind of like the 2005 to 2007 era of the label, which was
Yeah.
kind of like their second golden era, probably.
Yeah, dude, I can't wait to talk about Hello Goodbye. That shit was awesome.
Yes. So I mean, that's just kind of a brief background on the label. And I want to read through some of the list of bands that were on their roster, because I mean, there's some truly amazing bands that have either directly or other members have gone on to do incredible things. We've got Dashboard Confessional, The Early November, Finch, Hello Goodbye, like you mentioned, Something Corporate, The Starting Line, RX Bandits, of course, Newfound Glory, and Midtown. So those are, I think, the biggest ones that I am seeing on this list. But it goes on. It's quite an extensive roster.
Yeah, they were kind of like Fueled by Ramen before Fueled by Ramen was like
Sure.
a thing, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I think they overlap a little bit, but like I feel like we're like Drive Thru was like the flagship pop punk label.
Right.
I think Fueled by Ramen sort of kind of took that spot like later, I guess, like a couple years later.
Yeah, and I think that Fueled by Ramen has somehow managed to be more enduring, because I think at this point now they've been around a lot longer than 11 years. And I mean, I haven't kept up with them,
and
but
they've had like a gazillion bands that were like the biggest band in the world at one point.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think maybe they got the recipe, maybe they perfected the recipe and figured out how to make it more long lasting. And I mean, I don't know necessarily what all the differences would be, but that's definitely an interesting point that I think Drive Thru was kind of the forebearer for that. So I guess we can just wrap up by talking about what we're looking forward to talking to in this first collection. I think you mentioned one of them already, which was Hello Goodbye. What else kind of comes to mind as being stoked to talk about over the next couple of months?
Well, we kind of put like a short list together of like releases we wanted to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Hello Goodbye's EP and LP being one of them.
Right.
And then the one I'm most stoked for is the comp episode. I forget the name of the comp.
It's like a really long comp. It's called Drive Thru Records and purevolume.com. Yeah. Bands you love, have heard of, and should know. So kind of a lengthy title, but yeah, I'm stoked for that one too.
Yeah. And then, yeah, I'm stoked to hear the ones that like you suggested I've never heard before. Cause I did a lot of research, like listening wise,
mm-hmm.
but, there's still some that I haven't heard. Like I think the Benjamins you mentioned earlier. I don't even know what that is. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, that's one that I'm definitely looking forward to. But yeah, I'm just kind of looking forward to exploring the music, and it's going to be, I think, very nostalgic for me because some of these albums I haven't listened to in a long time, but I hope that they are good and that I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, like listening to a lot of this stuff is like really taking me back too. It's like taking me back to being like an awkward middle schooler. Just like listening to the early November, specifically the acoustic EP. I'm just like, this is like way like I was like such a whiny kid. Like if
Yeah.
this is what I was listening to, like I was really into Dashboard, but then like early November is just even more painful.
Yeah.
Like in a good way, I mean. Like,
Right, for sure.
But yeah, yeah, it's gonna be an adventure, but I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about some of these releases, some of these bands, and maybe just trying to figure out what was the recipe for success that this label managed to have, and maybe what was the recipe for downfall that they seem to have accomplished as well, because they're not around anymore.
Like,
so why, like, what happened? Why is that?
yeah, there are like a bunch of labels like that were like ones that were like huge, and then they just went like, remember like Vagrant Records? Like that was another
I do, yeah. Mm-hmm.
that was another big pop punk label for a while, and they kind of switched to like more of like an indie thing, and then I don't even know if they exist anymore, but they had like every fucking band.
Yeah,
and I was like in middle school and high school, and then now they're gone. And then yeah. So who knows? Maybe we'll find out what happened. Maybe it'll still be a mystery. We don't know.
Maybe. Well, I think that should wrap it up for episode 0. Unless you had any other thoughts or any closing remarks, Brian.
Let's see. Yeah, I don't know. I had some notes, but they're on my phone, and I'm currently charging my phone. And yeah, and I got Zoom open on my phone, so I can't access my notes. But
nice.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see. Like, yeah, because like some of this stuff I'm gonna be hearing for the first time in like 10 years, I think.
Yeah.
So that's gonna be a real trip. But
for sure.
Closing remarks. I got nothing. I wish I had something, but I got nothing.
And maybe that's the best closing remark of all. So, all right. Well, we'll see you guys on episode 1. Thank you.
Yeah. Peace.